Welcome to this week's Mystery Reads with the Aurora Public Library. My name is Stacy, and for those of you who are unfamiliar with the series, I will be reading 15 minutes of a book of my choosing, and you guys will try to guess the title and the author, which will be revealed at the end. So after we're done reading, we'll follow up with a short book talk and why you should read it. Before I start reading, I'm going to give you 3 clues about this book, starting with the first, which is that it was published in 2006. 2, it's a Missouri library tried to get this banned and was only successful for about 5 months. And 3, Broadway. So before I start reading, I am going to give a soft warning that this book is intended for older audiences. The first chapter will contain some aspects that aren't suited for younger audiences and may even be offensive to some. If that's something you aren't comfortable with, I'm going to give you a second. Click out if you need to. Okay. And lastly, I want to give a big shout out to Houghton Mifflin Harcourt for allowing us permission to read this book aloud. All right, so let's get started. He really was there all those years, a flesh and blood present, steaming off the wall paper, digging up the dogwoods, polishing the finals, smelling of sawdust and sweat and designer cologne. But I ached as if he were already gone. Right. So thank you so much for watching this week's APL Mystery Reads. Now it's time to reveal the book. If you have any guesses, please put them in the comments. I'll give you just a few moments. Let me remember that there are 3 hints I gave. So this book was published in 2006. It was banned from a Missouri library, but only for 5 months. And Broadway. So the title of the book is Fun Home, a family tragicomedy by Alice Fetchel. As the title, Family Tragicomics, suggests, this is not a particularly light read in terms of content and subject matter, as I'm sure many of you are aware from the first chapter alone. This book follows Allison as she documents her fraught relationship with her late father. The distant and exacting Bruce. Hello. So the distant and exacting Bruce Bechtel was an English teacher and director of the town funeral home, which Allison and her family referred to as the Fun Home. It was not until college that Allison, who had recently come out as lesbian, discovered that her father was also gay. A few weeks after this revelation, he was dead, leaving a legacy of mystery behind for his father to solve. I love this book because not only is it a memoir about the author's life, it's also a graphic novel and a Broadway play. So I actually discovered this by going in blind to a production of Fun Home with my friends a few years back. I didn't know anything about it. I knew the title. That was completely it. And when you go into a play called Fun Home and then realize that it isn't particularly fun, I was very surprised. So I think since it's a memoir, it's important to focus on the author. So Allison grew up in Lock Haven, Pennsylvania with her 2 brothers, her mother, and her father. Her mother was an actress and teacher, while her father was an Army veteran, a full-time high school teacher, and a part-time funeral owner. Allison and her brothers actually grew up doing chores and practically living in the funeral house. Hence why they called it the Fun Home. She has her degree in studio arts and art history and is a super successful American cartoonist. Most of her content focuses primarily on LGBTQ characters, topics, and themes. The two biggest genres for this book are probably tragicomics and memoirs. Tragicomic, if you're not familiar with it, it's a literary blend of tragedy and comedy. Originally, it was a tragic play with comedic elements, lots of Shakespeare, or a serious play with a happy ending. And I will not tell you which one this is, but I think that if Allison had written this just as a straight tragedy, it would be incredibly hard to read and digest. Her addition of comedy makes it easier to read. It makes it engaging to continue even after like the hard stuff. And to me, it's really important that her story was told as a graphic novel. There's just so much to unpack, and I think that this medium was the perfect way for her to do it. Because she wrote it and illustrated it, we really get to see everything that she wanted us to see. She's able to emphasize not only in her words, but in the pictures she selects to draws, what we should be picking up and focusing on. And I'm not sure why, but there's something about graphic novels that just make things feel less heavy. Just sort of easier to take in. And I think the three biggest genres that this book really talks about are hidden sexuality, gender identity, and death. I don't want to talk too much about them because I don't want to spoil anything for you to read it later, but it's important to talk about a little bit. So hidden sexuality, we see this so much through Allison discovering her own sexuality. And she's able to come out as lesbian to a very supportive community versus her father, the other main character, who just wasn't able to have the same kind of supportive structure. I think this novel focuses a lot on gender identity as well, because while Allison is discovering her sexual identity, she realizes that the things that she enjoys to do aren't quite in line with how society wants her to be. So she starts like leaning towards masculine clothes and cross-dressing, and there's a lot of commentary on how the two are tied together, at least for her. And then I think the third one, is death, which is a huge point in the novel. I don't want to take away from the experience reading this book, but you can tell that Allison, as she's writing it, is using this medium as a way to fully understand and unpack her childhood and her father, both their relationship together and who he was separately. So I highly recommend it. Again, adult topics, adult themes, so worth the read. And maybe if you don't want to read it, it is a Broadway musical that is so good. I walked out of the Broadway play like I felt like I was changed. Especially just, I don't know, seeing everything is crazy. And reading it too, it's also crazy. I guess it's probably all. I don't want to talk about too much. I don't want to spoil anything, even though, a lot of it's said in the first chapter alone. But thank you again so much for watching. This was fun. This is such a fun book. Fun but hard. Please join us for the next APL's mystery read next Thursday at 1 p.m. with our librarian, Tessie. We also have tomorrow Reader's Corner with Tessie and Elizabeth, talking about the sci-fi novel The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. And we also have the Pop Culture Den with myself, my coworkers Brandon and Elizabeth as we discuss the Final Fantasy remake. So thank you again for joining us. This was really fun. Bye.